Hi guys, welcome back. So today's in this session we will discussing about what are triggers in Salesforce. Here the step by step explanation will be given by me, and when to use before triggers, when to use after triggers, what are the types of trigger handler we were discussing in this session. So what is a apex trigger? So, Apex trigger that enables you to perform custom actions before or after changes to Salesforce record, such as insertion, updates, or deletions. Okay, what are the types of trigger? Trigger is of two types: before triggers and after triggers. Before triggers used to update or validate records before they are saved into the database, and after triggers are used to access field values that are set in the system to affect changes in other records. So here the question comes up: when to use before triggers and when to use after triggers. So here the demonstration part is before and after triggers, when to use it. So before triggers are executed in Salesforce prior to the records being inserted, updated, getting committed to the database. This means that you can make changes to the record being updated without issuing an additional DML statement that is insert update. After triggers are executed after records are committed to the database. This means that you can't make more changes to the record that were updated without issuing any DML additional DML statement. Got my point? Before you are committing into the database, then we should use for before trigger, that insert and update, and after the committed your database, without using any DML operation you cannot update your record. Yeah, insert your record into the related objects. Use before trigger if you want to make changes in the record being updated, and use after trigger to make changes to a related object. It means it before trigger is used if you want to make changes in the record, in the particular record. Use before trigger, that is, let's say you have account object and you want to change some field values, you want to update the field values, then use before trigger because you are updating in the account object. Suppose you were updating account, you were updating the account related object, that is, let's take a scenario for contact. After you creating a account, automatically contact should be created, then we should go for after trigger because it's a related object, that is contact upon your account, that is we should go for after trigger. Before trigger is used for to make changes in the that particular object, and after trigger is used if changes made to the air related object. What are the limitations of before trigger? You can't access the ID field of new records in before triggers, and formula fields are not calculated in before triggers. Roll-up summaries are not available. And what are the limitations of after trigger? That you cannot make additional field updates to a record in an after trigger without issuing any DML additional DML statements. Trigger events, that is before and after. They are before insert, update, and delete. These three are trigger events in before, and after insert, update, delete, and undelete. These four are events in after. Here the trigger syntax is trigger name, on which object you have to perform and trigger events like this. You have to insert a record in before, or you have to insert a record in after. You have to insert in before update, you have to insert update a record in after, you have to delete a record in before, yeah, you have to delete a record in after or undelete a record in after. What is the order of execution in Salesforce? Order of execution of Salesforce trigger, that is system validation rules, apex before triggers, custom validation rules, duplicate rules after apex after trigger, assignment rule, auto response rule, workflow rules, process builder and flows, escalation rules, roller summary fields, that is commit transaction takes place. What are trigger context variables? All triggers define implicit variables that allow developer to access runtime context. These variables are contained in the system.trigger class. Here some trigger context variable is trigger dot is before, trigger dot is after, trigger dot is insert, trigger dot is update, trigger dot is delete, trigger dot is undelete, trigger dot size, trigger dot is executing, trigger dot new, trigger dot old, trigger dot new map, trigger dot old map, and trigger dot operation type. These are the trigger context variable. Here the event before and after. Event like insert, update, delete and undelete. And what do we do before? In the insert we can use trigger.new, and after trigger.new and trigger.new map. In the update event we should use for trigger.new, trigger.new map, trigger.old and trigger.old map. And in the after trigger.new, trigger.new map, trigger.old and trigger.old map. And in the delete event, in before trigger.old and trigger.old map, and in the after trigger.old and trigger.old map. In the undelete event, before is not used because as we already see in the previous slides, just a second, yeah, in the before undelete is not there, so that's why trigger, yeah, undelete is not there, and in the after undelete trigger.new and trigger.new map is used. Trigger.new used to get a list of all the records after trigger activation. Trigger.new cannot be changed in after DML operation since it has already been stored. However, you can change it in a before DML operation. If you try to change trigger.new in an after DML operation, you will get error like this: execution of after update caused by system.final exception record is read only. Trigger.old prior to the update process. This method returns a list of old records. Only update and delete triggers have this feature. There are no old values in insert triggers. Okay. Trigger.old map. Prior to the update operation, it returns a map from the record ID to the related record, that is map ID, count. Only update or remove trigger have these options. There are no old values in insert trigger. Trigger.new map returns a map record from a record ID to the record it belongs to. For instance, map ID, count. This map will only be available once the record IDs have been filled in. As a result, the map and the before trigger cannot be accessed on after insert before the update, and after undelete trigger all support new map context variable. Trigger dot operation type. It returns the enum of the type system dot trigger operation corresponding to the current operation. That is, possible values to the system dot trigger operation enum are before insert, before update, before delete, after insert, after update, after delete, and after undelete. If you vary your programming logic based on the different trigger types, consider using the switch statement which with different permutations of unique trigger execution enum states. What are the considerations while using trigger context variable? That is, trigger.new and trigger.old cannot be used in ApexTML operations. You can use an object to change its own field values using trigger.new, but only in before triggers. In all after triggers, trigger.new is not saved, so a runtime exception is thrown. Trigger.old is always a read only, and you cannot delete a trigger.new. Some trigger related scenarios, that is, write a trigger when a new account is created, then create a contact related to the account. Which event is used in this? The answer is after insert event is used. So yeah, trigger new account on trigger, and this is event is after insert event is used because it is related to the contact object. Okay, in this scenario, after trigger is used because we have to make changes to object related to account. That is, object trigger.new variable is used to fetch newly inserted record id, and demal operations is used to insert the new records of the related object. That's why we use after insert event. Create a trigger to prevent users from creating duplicate account record with the same name. Which trigger event will be used? Yes, before insert. Yeah, before insert and before update. For account is equal to trigger.new list of account is a dot and duplicate account name exits. Third scenario says create field count of contacts on account object. When we add the contact for that account, then count should populate on the account detail page. When we delete the contact for that account, then count will update automatically. Here the trigger is trigger contact trigger on contact after insert, after update, switch on trigger dot operation type when after insert, contact handler dot number of contact when after update, contact dot handler number of contact. And here's it, it's a handler class, you can see it. You can take a screenshot also and read it very carefully. So coming to next slide, when a user creates an account record without rating, then pre-populates the rating as cold. When a user tries to create an account and the rating is blank, automatically it's update a value rating, update the rating as a cold. So we use before insert event and we query the list of records and we try to insert the account rating as a cold. Write a trigger to achieve the following, that is, create a new opportunity when our account is created, updated, or for industry, agriculture, the opportunity should be below stage, prospecting amount should be $close 0 and close date 90 days from the today. So here the trigger is for that. You can see, you can take a screenshot also and read it very carefully so that you can able to understand this. Moving to next slide. Yeah, what are the trigger best practices? So one trigger per object, as a single Apex trigger is all you need for one particular object. If you develop multiple triggers for a single object, you have no way to controlling the order of execution. If those triggers can run in the same context, it means that if you will write one trigger per object. Let's say you have write an account object one for one trigger, and another some scenario come, you write, you do not write another code for that account, you do not write another trigger for that account. You have to same, you have to follow existing code and add your scenario in your existing code. Because if you write two codes in the same object, then order of execution will not take care, and which one is executed first, it cannot control by yourself. So it's best practice is that write one trigger per object. So to trigger best practices, that is, second is logic less triggers. If you write methods in your trigger, those can't be exposed for test purposes. You also can't expose logic to be used anywhere else in your org. Third is context specific handler. Methods create context specific handler in trigger handlers. Fourth is bulkify your code. Bulkifying Apex code refers to the concept of making sure that the code properly handles more than one record at a time. Avoid SQL queries or DML statement inside for loop. An individual Apex request gets a maximum of 100 SQL queries before exceeding the governor limits. So if a trigger is invoked by a batch or more than 100 account record, the governor limit will throw a runtime exception. Sixth is use collection, streamlining queries, and efficient for loops. It's important to use Apex collections to efficiently querying data and store the data in memory. A combination of using collection and streamlining SQL queries like can contain sustainably help writing efficient Apex code and avoid governor your limits. Querying large data sets. The total number of records that can be returned by SQL queries request is 50,000. If returning a large set of queries, you exceed your heap limit. Then a SQL query for loop must be used instead. It can process multiple batch of records through the use of internal calls to the query and query more. Use @feature appropriately. It is crucial to write your Apex code to efficiently handle bulk or many records at a time. This is also true for asynchronous Apex methods. Those are annotated with the @feature keyword. The differences between the synchronous and asynchronous Apex can be found. Avoid hard-coding IDs in your code. While deploying Apex code between sandbox to production environment or installing force.com Apex packages, it is essential to avoid your hard codings in your Apex code. By doing this, if the record ID changes between environment, the logic can be dynamically identified the proper data to operate against, and data will not fail. Data will and not fail. So thank you guys. Please hit like and subscribe my naturals. These, I hope you like this video. Bye.